Lesson 25 from Seed to Plant. These are your vocabulary words for the week. Word number 1, grain. It is hard to pick up only one small grain of rice. A grain is a small part of something. 2, pod. A pod or shell protects peas as they grow. A pod is a shell that covers seeds. Soak. The children soak the soil with water to help the seeds grow. To soak something is to make it completely wet with a liquid. Soften. The boiling waters will soften the noodles. To soften is to make something softer or less hard. Root. The root of this plant goes deep into the soil. A root is a part of a plant that grows down into the ground. The root of a plant draws water and minerals from the earth. Shoot. We planted seeds in the ground. Later, we saw a shoot begin to grow. A shoot is a plant that has just begun to grow. Nutrition. Eating vegetables is a good way to get the nutrition that your body needs. When we eat healthy food, our bodies get the nutrition needed to grow and stay healthy. Tasty. I ate the whole apple because it was so tasty. If something is tasty, it has a good flavor. So here are your vocabulary words. I'm going to be reading the read aloud Johnny Appleseed and his apples. As I read, please look to see the different words that I read as I go. Johnny Appleseed and his apples. Many people think Johnny Appleseed is a made-up character from a tall tale like Paul Bunyan or Pecos Bill. In fact, Johnny Appleseed was a real person, even if he was quite an odd character. His true name was John Chapman. He became known as Johnny Appleseed because he planted apple seeds everywhere he went. In the early 1800s, settlers were pushing west. John Chapman had an idea. He thought people should have apples wherever they lived, so he set out with bags of apple seeds from his orchard in Pennsylvania and began to plant apples across the frontier. He traveled all over what is now the Midwestern part of U.S. He had tree nurseries in Ohio, Pennsylvania, Kentucky, Illinois, and Indiana. He gave away and sold many trees. He traded his trees or work for a meal and a floor to sleep on. John Chapman was unusual. He wore a coffee sack as a shirt and a tin pot on his head. He never wore shoes, even in winter. He was a vegetarian and very religious. He got along well with the Native Americans. He didn't seek the comforts that most men wanted. No wonder he became a legend in his own time. Nowadays, people like things to happen fast. Waiting 10 seconds for a computer screen to load can seem like a long time, but it can take 10 years for an apple seed to grow into a tree that has its own apples. An apple tree grows like other plants. Seeds begin to form when a grain of pollen from an apple blossom lands on the pistil of another apple blossom. Some seeds grow a pod to cover and protect them. The fruit of the apple covers and protects the apple seeds. Once the apple has ripened, it either falls to the ground and rots or is carried away and eaten. Either way, the seeds can end up in the ground. Rain will then soak the seed and soften its hard outer coat. Now, the root can crack open the seed coat and push down into the soil. The shoot can push up out of the ground. The little apple seed is on its way to becoming a sapling, a small tree. In a few more years, the sapling will become a mature tree that has fruit of its own. The seed from a tasty apple hardly ever grows into a tree that produces more tasty apples. Farmers have known this for thousands of years. That's why tasty apples are grown by grafting. That is when a piece from a good apple tree is carefully attached to a tree that is already growing. The apples that came from Johnny Appleseed's trees may have been filled with nutrition, but they most likely were not very tasty. That's why some historians think these apples were for making apple cider, a popular drink at that time. So, as you were listening, let's see if you can answer a few of these questions. What things do people believe about Johnny Appleseed that are not facts? Okay, so what do people believe, but they're not actually true? So, some people think that he's a made up character, right? But he's actually a real person that we've learned how to grow apples from. Number two, being a legend in his own time means that John Chapman was well known while he was alive, and people talked about him. Why might that have been true? So, John Chapman, or Johnny Appleseed, was unusual. He was different. He wore strange clothes but never wore shoes. He planted apple seeds everywhere. So, a lot of people talked about him because he didn't do things that regular people did. He was a little bit out of the ordinary. And number three, I wonder about the word pistil, Pistil. How can I find out what that means? Well, where could you look? You could look in a dictionary. We've talked about that before. And a pistil is a part of a plant that makes the seeds. So we're going to be learning about how seeds grow into a plant. And I will be including several videos. We'll be reading several stories. And we will even do some science experiments. So have a great week.